Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is David, and today I want to talk to you about a book that I just finished reading. It's The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and you can see that book here. This is the Puffin Classics edition, the at least the Puffin Classic edition that came out more recently. My copy was the Puffin Classics edition, but it was from a while ago, so it doesn't exactly look like this one. But um, but in any case, this is the copy that I read essentially. And you can use my link to buy the book if you'd like. So the first thing I want to answer is why did I want to read it, right? And of course, you don't have to have a reason to read a book other than to enjoy reading it. And of course, as humans, we've been on the planet for about 100,000 years, but we've only been able to read the writings of others for about 5,000 years. So it's still a privilege in the big scheme of things, you know. Now, on the other hand, I was also motivated to read this book because I have a very dim memory of when I was very young, when we went to watch the movie in the theater, me and my parents. I know I watched The Secret Garden, and I remember vividly that we went to the theater to see it, but I didn't remember anything else about the film other than that I had gone to see it. And now, as an adult, I wanted to read the original source material, the book, and that way I could, of course, enjoy the book for itself, but also potentially to watch the various film adaptations that have been made to it, and especially the one that I for sure watched as a child. Um, I look forward to watching that film, having now read the book and having thoroughly enjoyed it, as you might imagine. Now, let me tell you now about my initial overall impression. What I want to say is that this is a very uplifting story. It's a story about growing up, about changing one's attitudes to life, about seeing the good that is around oneself, and about the magical manner that we can think when we're children. And I can definitely say that I'm grateful to have read it, and I recommend it to any one of you without hesitation. It's great, of course, if you're a child, but even if you're an adult like me, um, it's still a great read. And I do have to say also that um, it is a great piece of writing, and it's incredible how Frances Burnett is able to capture um, uh, the intricacy, let's say, of the workings of a child's mind. And I say that from the perspective of me looking back as to how I thought as a child, um, and how she writes about the internal thoughts of a child in her work. So now I have to warn you, there are spoilers. Now, I will say that I didn't give too many particular spoilers because I don't want to take away from any of you the joy of reading the book and enjoying it thoroughly. Um, so the spoilers I'm going to give are kind of spoilers, but not much more than you can find, let's say, online. I didn't want to make this a synopsis or an analysis of the characters in detail. Um, and of course, if any of you guys would want me to do that, that would be exciting, and you could mention that in the comments. But separate and apart from that, uh, I do want to talk a little bit about the things I noticed about this work. Again, without making too many spoilers, because I don't want to take away the joy of reading this book from any of you. Um, yeah. So there are there are a small list of characters in the story, and of these, what I would argue are the four most important are Mary, Colin, Dickon, and Archibald Craven. Okay, and of course, Frances Burnett being British, these would have probably been pronounced in a British accent. But since I don't speak with a British accent, I didn't want for any of you to hear me imitate a British accent and butcher these names. But these are the main characters, okay? There are other characters, but these are the main characters that move the story forward, let's say. what captures my attention about the Secret Garden is the very clearly defined character arcs that we see in this story. There are two sequential character arcs that happen for two of the main characters. The first is that of Mary. The second is that of Colin. And at the end, there's also a tiny little arc, no less significant, but a tiny little arc, time-wise, in the context of the overall novel, um, that is also important. And they basically move from the character from a state of depression to a state of to a positive state, a state of positivity. Um, I would even venture to say that it even has kind of like a new age spin to it, if you if you think about it that way. Um, but that makes this story very uplifting to see this transition of these characters from being depressed to being positive. It's very inspiring and it's very hopeful, and especially at a time like right now, um, it is a beautiful thing to see, even if it's only make believe. Now I want to talk about some themes that I noticed in the book. Throughout the book, one of the themes that I saw is curiosity. So it's very clear, um, and Frances Burnett captures very well the natural curiosity of children, and that natural curiosity comes through in the enthusiasm in which their emotions are expressed on the page. And I couldn't help but notice myself being more absorbed in the story because I was excited too to find out what was going to happen. Um, and and so that was very exciting. Um, Another thing that happened in this story is the idea of anticipation. This is, I think, another theme that happens whereby a character will find out about something, but they won't be able to learn everything about it right away. So there's an anticipation that builds up of what will happen when I find out the reality of this. And then there's that process of discovery, and even in that process of discovery, you don't learn everything right away. So there's still an anticipation building up. And I want to distinguish this from suspense because you might say, well, David, if it's anticipation, could you also have called this like a suspense? And in my view, I feel that it was better to use the word anticipation as the theme here versus suspense, because usually I think of suspense as relating more to like um, something negative potentially happening versus something positive ultimately happening and something positive being expected. So that's why here I use the term anticipation. Another thing that Frances Burnett captures very well in this story, in my opinion, is the unbridled enthusiasm of children. There are several moments in the story where Frances Burnett is able to endow her characters with the capacity to communicate with that unbridled enthusiasm of children. The effusive joy about everyday things leaps off the page. Um, and that's true. Like, and of course, I do have to caution. I mean, I do have to comment that I'm talking about what's happening through the character arcs. Because again, remember, these characters start off kind of depressed and then they become positive. And in that transition, they develop this unbridled enthusiasm. And another thing that was very heartwarming about these stories was the wonder for everyday things and play. Because um, obviously, we live in the modern world and technology is everywhere. And a lot of us are addicted to our screens and stuff. But I couldn't help noticing throughout the story, I couldn't help but observe the wonder for things that were observed, like the way a plant grows or what you can see around you. And at the same time, um, the description of the characters, these three character, the three of the characters that are children, the Mary, Dickon and Colin um, playing um, in the garden was very poignant and very hopeful. It was poignant because obviously I can remember when I was a child and how nice it was to play. Um, and I can remember and to be able to imagine being able to play with that freedom, without pressure, without concerns. It's a very beautiful thing, and it makes me hopeful because it reminds me that there are beautiful things that humans can do. Um, instead of um, instead of like play is one of those beautiful things that humans can do. Let me just put it that way. Um, and so, in a certain sense, like I guess what I'm trying to say is that Francis Burnett captures some of the central components of being a child in a very articulate way and in a very beautiful way, and and it's definitely an escape um, from from I guess for me an escape from the heavy things that are around us all the times. Um, news and bad things happening and stuff like that. This story, it it takes you into a world that is free of these like negative concerns. Let me put it that way. And finally, let me say about the ending that first of all, I won't spoil it for you because I think that would not be very friendly. But I will say that the ending is very beautiful. And I can definitely say that it ties up a lot of it ties up the two major character arcs and the final character arc in a very beautiful way. And I can definitely say that it's definitely a book I recommend. And I definitely do hope to now watch the movies to see whether the directors were able to capture on film what Frances Burnett was able to capture with her words on paper. And I also want to say that with respect to this book, um, you know, that that it was unexpected and it didn't talk about the things I might have thought that it would talk about. Um, but it was very beautiful. It was very well written. Um, if you were to ask me what grade this might be appropriate for, I would say that maybe fourth grade um, would be the earliest when it might be readable. Maybe fifth grade. But I will say that it has some diction that makes it difficult, or not diction, but dialects. In other words, there are certain passages where the way that the English is written is modified in such a manner as to cause the reader to take on what is often referred to throughout the book as a Yorkshire accent. Um, so that might make it more difficult to read. But on the whole, definitely, I think a fourth grader might be able to read it. Um, definitely by sixth grade, you should be able to read it. Um, and again, if you're an adult and you've never read it, I also think it's worth reading. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video discussion of this book. Some of the themes that I think it has inside in its pages, and and again, I can definitely recommend it. Have a great day, and subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk about other books. Thank you.